Welcome to the NWAETC Project ECHO. I'm Kent Unruh, and I'd like to turn it over to our speaker for the talk today.
Good day, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here. It's my first ECHO meeting, and excited to share the results from CROI on PrEP. And this was a landmark session for prevention at CROI. And this quote from science, I think, really sums it up well. Doubts dispelled over HIV prevention. The initial trials showed that PrEP works to prevent HIV acquisition, but now we have a bevy of studies, and this quote says that quelled most remaining doubts about the real-world effectiveness of what's known as PrEP, and also answered questions about practical ways to use it, and suggested that it could help change the trajectory of the epidemic. And so I've just focused on 3 studies today, but in fact, this entire session, if you watch it on the CROI website, was really exciting. So the first study was presented by Sheena McCormack on behalf of her co-authors, which was a pragmatic, open-labeled, randomized trial of PreExposure Prophylaxis, or the PROUD study. And this study was particularly exciting because it was based at sexual health clinics in England. So these were the public STI clinics. And these clinics are accessed by over 110,000 HIV-negative gay men per year. And the diagnoses are made and reported through Public Health England. And this study was notable for the fact that it really used existing health services. And they wanted to examine whether the IPREX study results could be implemented in the real world. So they had fewer trial visits, and they were not as well resourced as a clinical trial. And in fact, the participants in this study had riskier behavior. So they identified individuals who had condomless anal intercourse reported in the last 90 days, who were older than 18 and willing to take a pill every day, and they were randomized to either Truvada now or Truvada after 12 months. And this was acceptable ethically because Truvada was not available standardly through the public health clinics in England. And individuals were followed 3 monthly for up to 24 months, and the endpoint was HIV acquisition. They enrolled 545 individuals, and they had very good follow-ups. So they had a large proportion of the individuals who were randomized contributed to the analysis. And this is the result. So within the immediate PrEP arm, they had 3 cases, and within the deferred PrEP arm, they had 19 cases, which translates to an efficacy of 86%, so actually higher than the clinical trial, an 86% reduction in HIV acquisition over 12 months. And this slide just includes some of the numbers. In the slides, I've included all the details in case you want to look later at the numbers, but I will just present the main results due to time constraints today. So a very significant value. And they also looked to see whether there was any risk compensation, so whether sexual behavior changed after the initiation of ART. And indeed, in this study and in the other studies I will show today, there was no risk compensation, no changes in sexual behavior. So they concluded that, well, it was very striking. HIV incidence in this population was high. And among individuals who were at risk, PrEP use was high. They also reported, I didn't show the data, but high PEP use in both arms. But this real-world study of PrEP utilization showed very high efficacy for prevention of HIV acquisition, and clinicians were able to incorporate PrEP into routine STI clinic practices. At the moment, the CDC recommends that PrEP is taken daily, and the next study I'm going to present is going to look at intermittent dosing for PrEP. And this was on-demand PrEP for MSM, and this is the results of the IPAGAY study, which was held in 6 sites in France and 1 site in Canada. And it was presented by Jean-Michel Molina on behalf of his co-authors. And this was a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial, again, ethically acceptable because PrEP wasn't standardly offered within clinics in France and Canada. HIV-negative, high-risk MSM who reported condomless anal sex with more than 2 partners within the last 6 months and good renal function were randomized to receive either full prevention services plus tenofovir FTC before and after sex, or randomized to receive full prevention services and a placebo. So these individuals actually received placebo. And the scheme for taking it was kind of complicated, but they managed to do this successfully. Participants took 2 tablets 2 to 24 hours before sex, then 1 tablet 24 hours later, not after sex, but after the first 2 tablets, and then another tablet 48 hours after the first intake. Participants had further sex, then they just kept taking tablets 24 hours, every 24 hours since the last sex act. And they had a similar sample size. They randomized 414 individuals to Truvada or placebo, and they had also, again, very high uptake and high follow-up of 88% in both arms. And again, a very impressive finding. So, and exactly the same finding as the PROUD study, an 86% reduction in the relative incidence of HIV acquisition, with, again, a very convincing p-value. So here in this Kaplan-Meier curve, showing the rate of HIV acquisition in the red line among participants in the placebo arm, and then in the blue line among participants in the FTC Truvada arm. And again, no change in risk compensation, so no change in sexual behavior with the use of PrEP. So in this high-risk population, HIV incidence in the placebo arm was higher than expected. With on-demand PrEP, there was an 86% reduction in HIV acquisition. Adherence was very good, and that did support the use of intermittent PrEP. And this on-demand dosing is an attractive alternative to daily PrEP. And I will anticipate the question. The CDC still recommends daily dosing to PrEP. One of the main findings from the study was that even though the dosing was on demand, PrEP use was quite high, and on average, individuals took an average of 4 doses per week, which is the number of doses required for sustained levels of PrEP. So the CDC still recommends daily dosing for PrEP. And then in the last study that I will review this lunchtime is that there was near elimination of HIV transmission in a demonstration project that used both PrEP and antiretroviral therapy from Jared Baton, and based here at the University of Washington, and his co-authors. And this was a demonstration project for serodiscordant couples in Uganda and Kenya. And here, HIV-positive persons started ART, and HIV-negative persons were offered PrEP. And they were offered PrEP for a short time, for 6 months, until their HIV-positive partner was virally suppressed. Here, they defined these serodiscordant couples who had characteristics for being at high risk of HIV acquisition. And I won't go through those in detail, but they included having a high viral load among the infectious partner, having no children, and having unprotected intercourse. And this demonstration project is ongoing, but to date they have a total of 858 person years where they have been able to look at the initiation of ART and PrEP. They had very high initiation of PrEP, more than 95%. And among those people who are eligible, and everyone is eligible for ART because they're serodiscordant, 80% have initiated ART and 90% are achieving viral suppression. It's interesting to note that even though these are high-risk couples, they know they're at risk of acquiring HIV. Only 80% have initiated ART. So PrEP is also playing a role here, for an important role for prevention. So they have about 48% of the data for follow-up has been accrued. And here showing the results. So a very high reduction, 96% reduction in the incidence of HIV. And I'll pause here to say that this was not a randomized trial, so this was a real-life demonstration project. They were able to use data from the previous randomized trial to estimate what the expected number of new infections would be. So they estimated that had this been a randomized trial, they would have seen 40 infections over the time through which they were offering both ART and PrEP, but instead they've seen just 2 infections in the observed time. So here, a 96% reduction in the number of cases of HIV. And so in summary, this was an open-label demonstration project in low-resource settings, which showed a very convincing reduction in the number of incident cases. Two cases of HIV within this very high-risk population is impressive, but they were able to use the trial data from a previous study to estimate what the effect would have been. And this was really an implementation science study that showed that PrEP could work in the real world. So in summary, these series of PrEP studies have shown that daily PrEP works to avert HIV. Intermittent PrEP does have the potential to substantially decrease HIV incidence. PrEP as a bridge to ART for high-risk serodiscordant couples works in low-resource settings. There are ongoing implementation science studies that will examine questions like the durability of the effect of PrEP, barriers and facilitators, and the use of PrEP as periconception. And the ultimate goal of all these studies is to inform public policy.